So over the past several weeks, I have consistently said that it gets harder and harder and harder to find real good trade values at this point in the fantasy football season because you cannot convince your league mates that your player or their player has greater or less value. Most players' values are set in stone at this point. And at this point, we just need to make trades that are going to put you over the top. Last week, I hit on Bijan Robinson and Kenneth Walker as buy low trade targets last week. But as I said, it gets harder and harder to find great trade targets throughout the season, and that's why there's only 3 trade targets on today's videos. So today we're going through the 3 buy low trade targets you need to acquire before week 11 fantasy football, guys. And I am almost at 7,500 subscribers in the new studio with the beautiful light behind me, guys. And as soon as I hit 7,500, I will be giving away lots of FFN hats for free to you guys. So please go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's go ahead and just dive right into these trade targets right now. So the first guy I've got up on this list, it's going to be Nico Collins of the Houston Texans right now. So this one, it probably is going to sound like a cheap shot, right? Like this guy didn't even play on Sunday versus the Cincinnati Bengals. So, you know, what does that even mean, right? Like, what does it mean when you go buy a guy who's injured? How is it a buy low? Well, this one's actually probably more layered than you may think. So first of all, obviously he gave 0 points to anybody this week. So that means that people that had Nico Collins, they were desperate searching for answers at wide receiver, and he gave you 0 points. So there was nothing to be had from Nico Collins' fantasy football production this past week. So that might have cost a lot of people some very important W's. And really one of the other reasons that is very important is that when you look at this Houston Texans team, Noah Brown, a player that many people did not know before several weeks ago. Now, this guy's emerging. This was the 2nd straight week he's had 150 plus receiving yards in a game. That's crazy. A lot of people didn't even know who this guy was, and now he looks like he could be their #1 wide receiver moving forward. So some people are concerned that he's what they wanted Nico Collins to be and what Nico should have been. Here's the thing. I like what I've seen from Noah Brown. I'm not going to debate that he's been a very good player, but I like what I've seen from Nico more because we've seen more of it from Nico Collins. Just because we haven't seen it lately and we didn't see it in week 10 doesn't mean it's happened. You go back to his first several games of this season, he was putting up 20 to 30 point games for you. Nico Collins has done it more consistently, and he's consistently getting around 80 to 90 yards per game. Nico Collins has been a fantastic player in fantasy football. And when I look at the playoff schedule that Nico Collins has coming up for him, I did a video a couple of weeks ago where I discussed some players that you need to get before your fantasy football playoffs. Nico Collins was one of them. And the reason why, one of the reasons why, is because of his playoff schedule. Tennessee, Cleveland, then Tennessee again. So obviously Cleveland's a tough matchup. Nobody's saying that Cleveland's just going to be this amazing matchup where he's going to score 30 plus fantasy points. I'm not saying that right now. What I am saying is that it's absolutely doable versus Tennessee, a pass defense that is the weakest part of their defense and a defense that Mike Evans just shredded in week 10 fantasy football. Nico Collins has lots going for him, and the injury uncertainty with him right now, I'm not going to lie, I don't know exactly the extent of the injury. All I know is that he started out the week in week 10 limited in practice, and then the last two days on Thursday and Friday, he downgraded to no practice, and then he was ruled out on Friday. So I don't know the severity of this injury, and the beauty is neither do your league mates. The uncertainty of the injury is what's going to drive Nico Collins' price down inevitably. That's the reality here with Nico Collins. You're probably going to be able to get Nico Collins relatively cheap, possibly as cheap as you've been able to get him all season long. What I would do, I would try to send a DeAndre Hopkins for him straight up. That's what I would try to do. I would also do a Javonte Williams type of deal straight up for him, because the reality is with those two guys' playoff schedules, what they've got coming up for them is not the same as Nico Collins. Nico has the quarterback. He's got the playoff schedule. I am big on buying Nico Collins before week 11. The next guy I've got on the list right here, this one is going to sound ridiculous, and I understand that. So I lead it off saying that this one's just going to sound crazy. You're going to think there's no way you're going to trade for this guy because I'm talking about Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. How many people think you're actually going to be able to buy him low, right? Like, it's probably not exactly what you're thinking of a buy low trade target right here. And in most scenarios, it's probably going to sound pretty ridiculous that this notion that he's some buy low candidate. It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to get him on the cheap. I'm not calling him a cheap player. In buy low trade target videos, what I always do is I want to find players who you can get for below value of their own value. And Travis Etienne, there's two things here that provide me a sliver of hope that you could do this with Travis Etienne. The first thing is that he had his first week since week 2. In week 10, it was abysmal. It was abysmal for him. It was abysmal for the entire Jacksonville Jaguars team. He had 35 yards, and that's not cutting it. What that may have cut was somebody pretty deep on a week 10 matchup that they needed to win. And of course, everybody's relying on Travis Etienne right now. Anybody who's got him, that's their running back 1, maybe running back 2. Travis Etienne, this was a really disappointing week for him. So combine that with the fact that every single week matters now in fantasy football. That's just the reality that we live in right now. And especially for the majority of fantasy football players, you're fighting for seeding right now. You're either fighting for seeding, you're fighting for a spot, and this guy may have cost someone a very valuable win in week 10. That's going to cut someone really deep. So if I can find someone, if you can find somebody who's doubting his value and wasn't sure about his value heading into week 10, I would try to send a Rachaad White type of guy, a Brian Robinson type of guy, with a Michael Pittman, a Mike Evans, a Devonta Smith to try to make this trade happen. Because like I said, I'm not saying that this is a very likely trade scenario. I don't think it's going to be all that likely that you're going to get Travis Etienne. But here's what I know. You got to take the shot. You got to take the shot because this is a guy who can absolutely win your playoffs for you in fantasy football this year. You have to take the shot coming off a bad week because we know this is not the status quo for Travis Etienne and for the Jacksonville Jaguars as a team. That's the reality here. You take the shot because you know this guy will rebound basically immediately as soon as he gets a chance in week 11. Derrick Henry is going to be my last trade target right here. Derrick Henry, let me tell you this about Derrick Henry. It's so funny because I was not expecting to have him here. I really wasn't. Because if you look back to what I was saying about Derrick Henry heading into week 10, what I was saying about him, I was telling people, you need to sell this guy. I would sell this guy for guys like Kenneth Walker and Bijan Robinson. I stand by that because not only did both those guys do well and rebound after some brutal performances in week 10, but I do believe that their value moving forward is still better than Derrick Henry's value. But after that week 10 performance that Derrick Henry just had, I honestly felt like this was a very opportunistic move. I think it's a very opportunistic move right here. What you see in week 10, what he did, he went 11 carries for 24 yards in week 10. Not only was it bad for him, but it was bad for all Tennessee Titans in week 10. So here's the thing. One bad game doesn't just do it. Everybody knows that a guy like Christian McCaffrey, right? If he has a bad game, no one's like, oh, dude, I'm going to send him Rachaad White and get Christian McCaffrey. Nobody's going to take you up on that trade. That's just the reality here that we're dealing with. And Derrick Henry, for the longest time, was in that class with Christian McCaffrey. But this wasn't Derrick Henry's only bad game this year. That's the thing about it. It was not his only bad game. Because when you look back to several weeks this season, he's given you dud performances that were in the single digits. This was not the first time he scored a single digit type of game. And the biggest issue as far as people's level of comfortability with Derrick Henry this season has been the increased involvement of Tyjae Spears. That has been a reality that Tennessee has seen for the majority of the early portion of the season. Well, here's the thing. Tyjae Spears, his volume has low-key gone down ever since Will Levis. That's just the reality here. He's getting about 4 to 5 carries per game with Will Levis. And those carries, those touches, they didn't bump up in that week 10 loss versus Tampa Bay. It wasn't like they went back to Tyjae Spears. This was just a bad game. It happens to the best of them, and Derrick Henry is still a very good fantasy option. Because here's the thing, guys. Like I said, last week I was saying to trade Derrick Henry for guys like Kenneth Walker, for guys like Jonathan Taylor, for guys like Bijan Robinson. I stand by that because the reality is now, when I'm telling you that you can buy this guy, you can buy him for way less than you could have last week. There's no doubt about it. Honestly, you could buy this guy for a guy like Ramondre Stevenson coming off 2 straight really good weeks in fantasy football. You could possibly get a Kareem Hunt type of guy or a Najee Harris type of guy, package him together, package those 2 guys together with a Michael Pittman type of guy, with a Mike Evans type of guy. That's the move I'm trying to make here, with a Tank Dell type of guy. Those are the moves I'm trying to make right here, because you can even look at Derrick Henry's playoff schedule on the screen right now. He's got really good matchups coming up. This was a bad game for the Tennessee Titans. They're going to rebound, and you can see on this screen right now that the playoff schedule for him is very opportunistic. The reality is, this is a guy who was not this cheap last week, and with all the issues that people were having at the early portion of the season with Tyjae Spears and Derrick Henry, those are all just going to bubble up in frustration right now. This is a prime buy low opportunity for Derrick Henry. So let me know who you are targeting and looking to sell before week 11 fantasy football, and what questions you need answered before the week. And at 2 p.m. Central today, my next video is going to be more preparation for the fantasy football playoffs. So stay tuned for that video, and I will see you there.